You act like you didn't know.
I forget. Thank you.
Forget everything.
Okay, Tet Vav, Tet Zayin.
Tet Vav. We are on, not Tet Zayin, I'm sorry, Tet Zayin.
They don't see the pencil or anything?
I do if you have one.
We are up to the, let's just sort of refresh our perspective here on what's going on with the Gemara. The Gemara is discussing this case of Talush, who is Mechubar, Talush, or Mechubar. In other words, something started out attached to the ground, and then it was Talush, and then it was separate from the ground, and then it was Mechubar, and then what happened is they reattached it to the ground. Jared, I can't see you at all. It's not a good thing. No, I can't see you over this. Okay. So this right, Talush, Mechubar, Mechubar, Talush, and then the Sofal Mechubar. What's the status of that item? So one of the examples which the Gemara gave was I took a knife, which is Talush, and I embedded the knife into a wall. Okay? So the wall, right, is that now considered Mechubar, or is it considered Talush? Now, that would be distinct from, let's say, the case where the wall had a very sharp, something jutted out, and it was very sharp, and I could shech the animal on that thing that jutted out from the wall. That would just be Mechubar. Okay, so what the Gemara is trying to do is analyze what's the status of something which was Talush and then became Mechubar. Is it considered still Talush, or is it considered Mechubar? Why do we care? Why do we care? This is the Gemara Chulin. Why do we care? Because ultimately we're going to want to know, can I do shchita with something which is Mechubar? In other words, I have this projection coming out of a cave wall. So we'll eliminate all of the variables. I have a projection coming out of a cave wall that's very sharp. Or else I carved into the cave wall so that there's now something, knife sharp in there, and I want to shecht an animal on that. That's mechubar. Can I do that? Okay. And if the answer is no, I can't do that. So then if I take a knife and I embed the knife in the wall of the cave, right? So I cement the knife in the wall of the cave. So is the knife now considered mechubar or not? Or is it still retain its status of Talush?
If it was once not connected, and we reconnected it, right? What was
That's
that?
what
But
we're
here
talking
he's
about
saying
next
that it
week.
was carved from the wall.
No,
No,
there's two
separate
questions.
scenarios.
Two separate
Something
cases.
that was never connected, and then we reconnected, or maybe one time it was, but we reconnected it to the wall.
Okay.
Or something that was never disconnected to the wall, and it's part of the wall, and never was ever disconnected.
So those are the two cases.
Right? That's the.
Well,
Isn't that where we left off? I think.
Yeah, correct. What I'm trying to lay out is what we're essentially grappling with is what's the status of this item that is reattached. Let me just, what's the status of this item that is either attached
Or
reattached
The reattached was
to the
what we
wall?
were-
Does it retain its status of talush, or does it now change its status and it's now considered mechubar? We learned the braisos, and we're going to come back to those braisos today about what happens with shchita with those items. But that's what our concern is about. So last week we delved into the topic of let's see. Tes Zayin Amid Aleph. Tonight we're going to be involved in V'chi Yutan, in Tameh, in Tahara and Tuma. But when it came to Avodah Zarah, what did we say when it came to Avodah Zarah? When we came to Avodah Zarah, we said that a person can make his house a Makom Avodah Zarah. In other words, it's possible a person can make his house a Makom Avodah Zarah. How do you make your house a Makom Avodah Zarah? You worship your house. You bow down to your house. You do any of the avodos that you would normally do, right? You bow down to your house. Under those circumstances, if you do it within the framework of how somebody creates an avodah zarah, you have made your house into an avodah zarah. Wait a second. What do you mean I've made my house into an avodah zarah? Is there anything more mechubar to the ground than my house? My house is very mechubar to the ground. That's true. Right now it's very mechubar to the ground. But when it started out, right, it was not mechubar, right? It was talush. In other words, the bricks or the wood, right, or the stone, whatever it's made out of, whatever your house is made out of, right? It was talush, and now it's mechubar. What do we consider that? Do we consider that talush still, or do we consider it mechubar?
Does Gemara ever address what exactly is mechubar? Like if you just pile bricks on top of each other.
So that's what we're
discussing.
struggling with right now. And Elliot, you're
a few pages from now.
No, but that's really what.
There in about a year.
Right, but you'll see it. No, it won't take a year, half a year. No, but Elliot, you'll see it tonight. Right, you'll probably get reference to it tonight. You'll understand it tonight. So when we look at the house, which is right, the house is certainly something that was talush, and now it's mechubar, even though the house is made out of things that started out as mechubar. In other words, wood started out as trees, right? It was mechubar. Stones were at one point in the ground, right? They were mechubar to the ground. They were dug up from the ground. So the items, right? The brick is made out of items that were mechubar. So, right, the idea is what's its status? So we learned last week that its status is talush. How do we know that it's talush? Because we said step number one, if you bow down to your house, if you worship your house becomes an avodah zarah. Step number two, you can't make an avodah zarah out of something which is considered karka or mechubar lakarka.
What is
Karka is ground, earth. So for instance, the pasuk tells us, the Elohehem al heharim. We have to destroy their divinities, right? Their God, small g, al heharim, on the mountains, velo harim Elohehem. The mountains are separate and distinct, that the mountains can't become their deities. So as much as a person might want to worship a mountain, he can worship it, but it doesn't have the halachic status of a makom avodah zarah. Interesting dip, right? It doesn't have a halachic status of a makom
so
avodah
Mount
zarah.
Everest, which people, I think some of these Tibetan cultures view as, so that's not
from their perspective, it's avodah zarah, but from our perspective, it's not considered avodah zarah. You can't take something which is karka and transform it into an avodah zarah.
Okay.
Wait. Brick is from Earth.
But not original.
But it's still attached.
It's been removed.
It's
It's
been
been
removed.
reformed. And
Got it.
The bricks been
Got
touched.
it.
Okay.
Not its original.
So in other words, these are all instances of something which was mechubar, then became talush, and now is quote mechubar again, right? Quote mechubar again, because like Elliot said, we're not
there's been a
100%,
process.
right? In other words, this house, right? If I took my car and rammed it into the house isn't going anywhere. My car is going somewhere, but the house isn't going anywhere.
You might be going somewhere.
Right? I might be going somewhere. Right? You guys might just send me something, right? But the idea, right? The idea is that from avodah zarah perspective, talush u'mechubar is still considered talush. Now the Gemara looks at it from another perspective, and this perspective is what happens when it comes to the idea of the chiyutan. So just to review, we started it at the very, very end of last week's shir. Tuma can be transferred to something through touch.
Mm-hmm.
In other words, I have an apple, and I have the apple sitting on my table, and all of a sudden, this mouse runs across my table, jumps on top of my apple, and dies. All right, I mean,
But it happened.
All right, listen, you can steal a thing of
We've
credit
seen some
cards, that
crazy.
can happen.
We've seen crazier things.
All right, so that's what happened. The mouse,
I've seen a dead goose run away.
Right.
And-
So,
Reporting, please.
okay.
Not on TV.
Okay, so right, so we have this idea of a sheretz, right? A mouse is a sheretz within within the definition of a sheretz. It's dead. A dead sheretz transmits tuma, so it can make my apple tummy. However, it can only make my apple tummy if my apple was wet. In other words, if there was some medium of liquid
To transfer
I
the,
remember that.
between the apple and the sheretz, so then the apple can become tummy. Okay. However, we learned that from Psukim. However, the liquid needs to be something that either I put there
You want
or I wanted. I didn't put it there, but I wanted it to be there.
honey.
We have a number of liquids that fit into that category, right? This is the case we learned before in the Gemara. I take my what I'm harvesting up to the roof to dry it out, whatever, and the dew falls on it, right? Do I want that? Do I not want that? Right? So these are the ideas behind it. So we're going to look now at a situation. Again, what are we trying to get to in the end? Whether talush and then mechubar is considered mechubar, or whether talush and then mechubar is still considered talush. Those are the two possibilities, and we're trying to figure out. In Avodah Zarah, we learned already that talush and mechubar is still considered talush. What's the case when it comes to Tumah and Tahara? What's the case? And ultimately, we're going to want to know what's the case when it comes to Shechita, because after all, this is Chula. Right, so we're going to want to know that. So let's look inside the Gemara. Right, the Gemara says as follows.
A2?
A2, yes, correct. A2. So we have the following case. So the Indian hechsher, it is you see all the way on the right, in the right margin, right above Rabbeinu Gershom, you have that fancy line. The right margin, halfway down the page, you have that fancy line. Everybody have it? That's the left margin, the right margin. Right? All the way by the binding of the book, the center of the binding of the book. Right? If you go over with that right line and you go up about 3 lines, you'll see where we are.
What's the first word in the line?
First word in the line is Elohehem.
Yeah.
Okay, everybody have it?
Got it.
So says the Gemara, Le'inyan hechsher zeraim. When it comes to the case of transmitting tuma through a liquid, so tanaihi, this is a machlokas. What's a machlokas? What's the machlokas? Remember, what are we looking for?
The issue of
The issue of talush u'mechubar. What's the status? Talush, then mechubar, what's the status of it? So the Gemara says, well, in the case of Avodah Zarah, it was clear. It was still considered talush. In the case of hechsher tuma, what's it considered? So the Gemara says, Tanaihi, it's a machlokas tonight. Now we're going to have to understand how it's a machlokas tonight. It's a little bit of a complicated case, but let's look at it and let's see. All right, Desnan, we learned the following in a Mishnah. The Mishnah in Machshir, and what does the Mishnah say? Hakofeh ka'ara al hakosel. You had a wall, and you put a plate on top of that wall. And you had a basket of vegetables sitting by the wall, right up against the wall. Okay, now what happened? It's raining. Okay, the water hits the plate and now runs off the plate and falls onto your basket of vegetables, right? And let's say it's, raining would be, maybe raining is not so helpful because the rain itself would fall into the vegetables. But you could say, I don't want the rain to fall into, I don't want that liquid to be there. So let's see how this case plays out. Okay. So I put my plate on the wall and the water is now running off the plate and touching my vegetables. So can my vegetables become tameh or not? Meaning, do I define the water as v'chiyutan? V'chiyutan are the first words of a pasuk. We have the pasuk here. We do not have the pasuk here. Okay, you probably have it in the commentary. Yes, in note number 18, the pasuk v'chiyutan mayim al zera v'nafal min nivlasam alav tamehu lachem. Right. So when we use the expression, is this water in the category of v'chiyutan, it means, is this water capable of transferring tuma because the owner wants it or is benefiting from it? Or is it not in the category of v'chiyutan, meaning it's not something the owner wants, and since he doesn't want it, it can't transfer tuma? Because remember, the requirement to transfer tuma has to be v'chiyutan. It has to be something that either the owner did, he put the water or the liquid there himself, or he's happy that it's there. He's happy that it's there, okay? So says the Gemara. Hakofe ka'ara al hakosel. So you put a plate on top of a wall. So what was the purpose for putting the plate on top of the wall? So there are at least two possible reasons why you put the plate on top of the wall. Give me what those reasons are. Don't look in the Gemara, just think. Right? Why would I have put my plate on top of the wall? There's water falling on the wall.
Oh, so the water's falling.
There's
To clean
water.
the plate.
There's water falling on the wall. Let's say there's a waterfall.
Two things. You're going to catch the water so
Right.
you can drink it, or you're going to clean the plate.
Okay, so number one, which the Gemara is going to mention, is I need to clean the plate. In other words, I want the plate to get wet. Why? Because I want to clean the plate. I want to clean the plate. Now, if I want the plate to get wet so that I can clean it, do I want the water or not want the
I
water?
want the water.
You want the water on the
Clearly, I
plate.
want the water.
You don't
Clearly, I
necessarily
want the
fruit,
water.
you
Okay.
want the plate.
Clearly, I want the water. Now, let's say that I put the plate on top of the wall for another reason. And what was that reason?
You didn't want your kid to touch it.
Well, I mean, like I said, there could be multiple reasons why you put the plate on
That
top of
sounds
the
like the
wall.
best one.
Right? But why did I put my plate on the wall? Because there happens to be a crack in the wall at the top. And I don't want the water
To go down the crack.
going into the crack, because then when it freezes, it's going to damage the wall. So I put the plate on top of the wall. Why?
Stop the
Out
water.
of the crack.
To cover the crack.
It's the opposite.
Do I want the water or do I not want the
no.
Now
water?
you're preventing.
Now I don't want the water, right? I mean, I want the plate to bounce, I want the plate there so the water can bounce off of it, but I don't want that water. I'd
Then
be,
then the water's going where you want it to go.
what?
But then when the water falls on the fruit, it's going where you want it to go.
No, it's just not going where I don't want it to go. I mean, it could go
You want it to
anywhere.
go up.
It could go anywhere. I don't care where it goes.
As long as it's not in the crack.
As long as it's not in the crack, right?
You're not directing the water.
Well, depending how you put the plate on it, it's puts the water.
Okay, so you hear the
Two positions.
right? You hear those two possibilities. So that's what the Gemara says. Bishvil shetudach. If I put the plate up there in order for the plate to be cleaned, tudach, lahadiach, means to wash the plate. In other words, I put the plate up there because I wanted the water to fall on the plate to clean the plate. Now, what's going to happen when the water falls off the plate? It's going to fall on my vegetables. Do I want it to fall on my vegetables?
No.
No, because I don't want my vegetables to become tameh. So then who cares whether I want the water to fall on the plate or not? So here's another principle, another fundamental principle here. If I want the water initially,
Then I want it always.
so then whatever happens to that water afterwards
Is-
is considered like I want it. So I wanted the water initially to fall on the plate, and it did, and I was happy. And now the water
Any
spills
consequences
off the
after
plate
that are-
and
Responsible for all the consequences.
falls on the vegetables. And I was like, oh, I'm not happy about that. Tough.
You're responding, yeah. If
right?
it's-
It's tough. Doesn't matter that you're not happy about that, because since you were happy with it at the beginning, you have to live with the consequences. In other words, obviously you're not going to be happy if your produce becomes tameh, but you are happy with it initially. In other words, initially it could be described and classified as v'chiyutan. So if it can be described initially as v'chiyutan, so any subsequent use of that water, or any subsequent
The consequences.
consequence of that water is also
You are
described
now
as
gonna be
v'chiyutan.
unhappy.
Right? Makes sense. We understand that, right?
Yes.
So says the Mishnah. If I put it up on the kotel, bishvil shetudach, in order for the plate to be cleaned, so harei zeh b'chiyutan. So now when it falls onto my vegetables, my vegetables are in a basket next to the wall, and now the water from the plate spills over and lands on my vegetables. And now, I find there's a mouse, right? A dead mouse swimming with my vegetables. So I'm in
Tummy.
kahak tzaras, because the water is classified as v'chiyutan, which means it can transmit tuma. Dead mouse is tameh, and therefore my vegetables are now tameh.
That's it.
Okay. However, let's say I put it on the wall. Bishvil shelo yilakeh hakotel.
Why not just move the vegetables?
John,
Okay.
Then we wouldn't have this.
John.
We want the argument.
Stop.
Okay, I'm just going to stop the recording for a second. Hold on a second.
I don't know, it seems like a simple solution.
All right, I can't. Can I?
It's okay, you can leave recording, I have no problem.
No. I don't want.
I'm the
to
guy that
record
asks the
this.
sports question. I'm gonna be very quiet. Till my next comment.
Okay. Anybody wonders what happened to those missing moments? You have to come to class. Okay. So says the Gemara, if you put it on the wall, if you put the plate on the wall, shelo tilakeh hakotel, because you don't want the wall to be damaged by the water. You don't want the wall to be damaged by the water. Eino b'chiyutan. Right? So then whatever water spills over onto your vegetables because you didn't move them, whatever water spills from the plate onto those vegetables because you didn't move them, is eino b'chiyutan. Why? Because you don't want that water. In fact, the whole reason you put the plate on top was to get rid of that water. Right? You don't want that water. You didn't want it to fall. Okay, but it was going to fall on the wall, so you put the plate there. You don't want that water at all. So therefore, it's eino b'chiyutan. Right? Eino b'chiyutan. Okay. So if you put it there, shelo yelaka hakotel eino b'chiyutan. So says the Gemara as follows: Ha bishvil sheyudach hakotel hareze b'chiyutan. Right? If you put it on the wall for this is just another case, right? To wash the wall, right? Ha bishvil sheyudach hakotel. In other words, let's say you set up the plate, right? You balance the plate somewhere so that the water fills the plate and then spills over and cleans the dirt off the wall. right? That's how you set up
You
the
still
plate.
want the water.
Oh, so that's exactly right, right? You still
As
You
long
s-
as you're using the water for something you want.
you
it's
still
going
want
to
the
make
water,
vegetables
says the Mishnah Harei Zeh B'chiyutan. So the three cases that we have, right? To wash the plate, to protect the wall, or to wash the wall. Now says our Gemara. It says, right, the Gemara is now interpreting this, we're continuing on with the Mishnah actually. So Amar Rabbi Elazar. Rabbi Elazar says, Tavra. This seems to be a conflict. And this is there's a contradiction within these positions. What is the contradiction within these positions? Okay, can you figure out the contradiction within these positions? So let's look. Let me see. Do we have? Tavra. Look at Rashi all the way at the bottom of the page. 1, 2, 3, 4 lines up from the bottom of the page. The last 3 words on the line. Tavra. It's a contradiction. Okay. So says Rashi, Kashya. Right? It's a kasha. It's a problem. It's a contradiction. It's a difficulty. Why? So Rashi explains. Kashya hach reisha l'seifa, right? The first expression and the last expression seem to be a contradiction. Utrei tanai ninhu, and they seem to be, right? They seem to be 2 different tanai, right? They're 2 different opinions. In other words, 2 different people. What are the 2 opinions? Mar choshiv le talush lahai kotel, umar choshiv le mechubar. Right? One of them considers it talush, and one of them considers it mechubar. Okay? Mar choshiv le talush hoil v'lav mechubar meikarohu. Shekvar hayu avanav telushos v'chibram, and he now put them together in a building. Umar chashiv le'mechubar b'hainu t'nai da'amar la'el. Now Rashi doesn't help us with understanding what the contradiction is, but let me try to take you through it. Okay, what was the first opinion? First, the Reisha, the first position in the Mishnah was what? If the water falls on the plate to clean the plate and then spills over to the vegetables. What's the halacha?
No good.
Kiyutan. Right? It's classified as v'chiyutan. Okay? If the water falls, so that would seem to mean that anything other than cleaning the plate, if the water was falling and it's falling and I put the plate there for any reason other than cleaning the plate, what should the halacha be?
That it doesn't transmit.
That it doesn't transmit, and
Doesn't transfer.
that it's not v'chiyutan. In other words, if the Reisha is taking the position that what is the definition of the case of v'chiyutan? The definition of the case of a chiyutan is where the water is falling on the plate to clean the plate. Okay? That implies that if the water is falling on the plate for any other reason than to clean the plate, it is not considered v'chiyutan. Tell me why that's true.
It's the only thing they mentioned. I mean, that's the only thing I could.
Close. Build on that. In other words, if I'm mentioning a case to illustrate a point, okay, if I'm mentioning a case to illustrate a point, so I'm going to mention the case which most clearly demonstrates this point, okay? So let's assume that I have I have a spectrum that goes from over here to over here. Okay? This end over here is v'chiyutan. This end over here is not v'chiyutan. The case over here is a case of cleaning the plate. The case over here is a case of preventing the wall from getting damaged. Okay? What about if something falls on the continuum of the spectrum? What would it seem to be? In other words, it depends, right?
Depends on the presentation.
Right? If I say that these are two separate opinions, then it makes sense. In other words, let's say something falls right in the midpoint, okay? Whatever it is, whatever that case is, falls in the midpoint. So I'll say, according to this person, it belongs over there. According to this person, it belongs over
By the
here,
way, that's the principle. That's the right rabbi, the right question.
right?
Well, no, this is different. This is saying that everything in the middle is forced on its opposite.
Right, correct.
Everything in the middle is forced on its opposite because the 2 points don't meet each other. There's too much middle ground.
In other words, the one who gives us this example, rabbi who gives us this example being the example of washing the plate, the one who gives us this example, he thinks everything else
Is no
It's
good.
fine.
is not, right, everything else is not a problem. Right?
You want to wash the plate, you're good.
This is the problem right here, but everything else on the spectrum is
Okay.
not a problem.
No.
Okay? The rabbi over here who says this is not a problem gives us this example. He thinks everything over here is a problem. So in other
The
words,
one who's lenient is really strict, and the one who's strict is really lenient. Kind of.
yeah, I guess kind of, right?
Yeah. Because of that middle ground.
So the Gemara is saying that would seem to indicate that this Mishnah is recording two different opinions. A machlokes Tanaim. One Tana says, this is the only case of v'chiyuta. Everything else on the spectrum is not.
And the other guy.
The other Tana says, this is the only case of not v'chiyuta. Everything else on the case, everything else on the spectrum is. Right? So it would seem to be a conflict, a contradiction, right? That one can't say what the other is. If you pick something in the middle, anywhere on the spectrum, they're going to disagree about that case. Right? If you pick anything on the spectrum, they're going to disagree about that case.
The funny part is they're going to send them to the other guy on either side.
Why?
Because the person who thinks it's okay thinks nothing else is, and the person who thinks it's not okay thinks everything else is. Because it's going in both
But
directions.
the reason, what happens is we have this Mishnah, and when we have this Mishnah, it, as the Gemara said, it's a machlokes. It seems to be Tanai. Tanai means a machlokes Tanaim. There are two Tanaim. We don't know their names. There are two Tanaim. One says just this, but not all of this, and the other one says just this, but not all of this, right? And they have two separate opinions. They disagree with each other. Okay, what are they disagreeing about?
What purpose you're using the water for?
Okay, so it would seem
At least that's
That-
what it seems on the outside.
it would seem that what they're disagreeing about is how we define v'chiyutan, right? That's what it would seem, because according to the one over here with the plate that has to be washed, right? If you want the water, okay, it's v'chiyutan. If you want the plate on top, it's v'chiyutan. According to the one over here, right, who says it's not v'chiyutan if you're covering the crack in the wall. So he seems to be defining, the machlokes seems to be how we define v'chiyutan maybe. But maybe not. Maybe there's another way of looking at this machlokes. Because remember, why is the Gemara bringing this?
Because it has to do with kalush. And
Right, it had this somehow has to connect in to talush and mechubar.
Right, so the wall,
How do we connect this in to talush and mechubar?
so it seems to relate to the wall, right? The wall is now connected to the ground, presumably.
But was it always? Because walls are built.
Right.
Not, they could be carved as.
Well, if it's a cave wall, yeah.
Well, let's go with
But if it's a
Natan.
house wall.
Let's go with Natan for right now. Okay. Let's go with Natan for right now. And in order to right,
The wall is connected.
So basically, you're going back
We
to.
know we're dealing with something that's supposed to elucidate the examples of connected and not connected, right?
That's a great word.
So the plate is not the issue. But the wall is the issue because the wall is presumably connected to the ground. So something about this example is supposed to clarify the issue of connected water falling on something connected to the ground.
okay.
And if it's always been connected to the ground.
Well, now
And the
let's.
implication
well-
to me is that it's a wall. It seemed to me like it's something that we
Well,
built.
so we know clearly, right? In other words, we can, as we've looked at a wall previously, the wall seems to be an example of talush
Right.
and then mechubar.
Mhm.
That's what the wall seems to be. Now we know by avodah zara, talush and mechubar has a status of talush. It's not considered mechubar, even though it's attached to the ground. It doesn't have the halachic status of mechubar. It has the halachic status of talush.
Right.
Okay.
Oh, so what we're
How does
are we saying
Talush
that
and
these two
Mechubar-
Tanaim are disagreeing about for Tuma and Tahara with Talush and Mechubar?
Correct, right?
Yeah.
These two Tanaim, at the fundamental difference between them is whether or not the wall is considered mechubar halachically. In other words, it started at the items of the wall started out as talush, and then we built the wall. So is that wall, now that wall's attached to the ground, it's sitting on the ground, you're not moving that wall. Is that wall considered mechubar halachically, or does it still have the status of talush halachically? Now, if it was avodah zarah, we would be able to answer this question. If it was avodah zarah, we would answer the question, we would say what? It's definitely talush. Right? You bow down to that wall becomes
It's an
asur.
idol, yeah.
Right? It's definitely talush. But now we're looking at it from the case of Tuma and Tahara. Right? So what's the operative principle? The operative principle by avodah zarah was that karka can't become avodah zarah. Right? Karka can't become avodah zarah.
I'm sorry, Karka?
Ground,
We've already
Right.
established
Earth.
that can't happen.
Okay.
mountains,
The
whatever it
mountain
is,
can't be
Mountain
able to-
can't-
mountain
be avodah.
can't become avodah zarah because of the pasuk. That's the operative principle. When we know that operative principle, so we have to know that operative principle in order to understand our case, to be able to understand the machloket, right? In other words, since we have the principle that karka can't become avodah zarah, and this guy can make his house avodah zarah, ergo, his house is not considered karka. It's not considered mechubar. Okay. So what's the operative principle here when it comes to Tuma and Tahara? What's the operative principle
Well,
here?
it seems we don't know. There's a dispute about what the operative principle is.
So what are they arguing about?
Well, could they be talking about two different, I mean, I don't want to throw that in there, but could they be talking about two different, one guy's talking about a talush plate and another person's talking about a plate that's been installed permanently? In other words, the person who installed the plate to the crack, maybe he installed it permanently.
Well, I
Oh,
mean,
I'm
it's
sorry.
theoretically possible, but that doesn't help us get to that fundamental that we need to have. Right? We need to come to a fundamental so that we understand what this machlokes is or not. So let's look at it from this perspective.
Well, for avodah zarah, everything that we're talking about would all be tamei because all of it was.
Don't mix the two cases.
Okay.
We're just going to get confused if we mix the two cases.
Okay.
All right? If something is considered mechubar, can it become tameh or not?
But no,
Correct. You're right.
no.
You're correct. In other words, if something is considered mechubar, so then that item can't become tameh.
Like that same story, if the apple was still attached to the tree, then we wouldn't have a question.
Right? The apple is still attached to the tree, and I have a dead mouse hanging on it.
Doesn't matter.
Doesn't matter. Right? If it's mechubar, it's considered halachically mechubar, then it doesn't become tameh. So keep that in mind, and let's now look and see.
Are we having a conversation over the same wall?
That's what I said, but he said yes.
For the time being, let's assume yes.
That's what I asked.
Let's assume yes for the time being.
It doesn't seem like we
You're trying to redeem yourself, but let's assume yes for the time being.
Listen,
Okay.
as long as the wall's painted nicely, that's fine.
So what do we?
Okay, we're struggling here. Let's
Yeah,
go.
a little bit.
So we know that something which is mechubar can't become tameh, correct?
Correct.
If it's mechubar, it can't become tameh. Can you figure out now with that piece of information what the machlokas here might be?
Well, then it wouldn't matter what the plate's doing. To the wall, it wouldn't matter because if
The only thing I can think of is the plate was placed there to stop the crack as a permanent.
Okay, look at note number 21. Okay, what does note number 21 say? This distinction would be explainable in terms of the fact that a plate is detached, talush,
it's not.
whereas a wall is not. When one wishes the rainfall to rinse his plate, his satisfaction with the water is significant. Why? For it concerns a detached item. In other words, the water washing the plate is talush. So the water washing the plate is significant.
It's not an attached plate. He put it there.
Correct.
Clean
He
it,
said
now
it
he takes it. Right, right.
He put it there, correct. He put it there, no question. He put it there, right?
But
And
then
he's
you're
satisfied
calling the
because it's a
wall machubar again.
Well, hold on a
But not the
second.
plate.
Wait, we're not,
No, I know that.
let's just take baby steps, okay? So baby step number one is you put your plate, which is talush, on top of the wall so that your plate can get wet, okay? So says as we're reading in the note 21, when one wishes the rainfall to rinse his plate, this is the crucial line, his satisfaction with the water is significant, for it concerns a detached item, right? It concerns a detached item. What's the detached item?
The plate.
The detached item is the plate. And since it concerns the detached item, it now becomes a question of, did he want it? Or did he want the water, or did he not want the water? In other words, the water, the very fact that the plate is detached makes the water that falls on it significant, right? Significant, okay? We'll talk in a moment about why that is, but makes the water that falls on it significant.
Because
If that's the case, now we have to, since the water falling on it is significant because the plate is detached, it's talush,
you put it there.
now we
specifically.
want to consider whether or not he wants the water or not, right? Whether or not he wants the water. In other words, in the case which is brought, since the plate is talush, the water falling on the plate is significant. And since the water falling on the plate is significant, it now comes into our halachic view, and we need to define it as v'chiyutan or not v'chiyutan. Okay? But if the water that was falling on the plate was not significant, halachically, then we wouldn't care about whether it was v'chiyutan or not v'chiyutan. Because if it's not halachically significant, it doesn't enter into our view. And if it doesn't enter into our view, we don't care whether it's v'chiyutan or not. Okay? You understand that possibility? Is that distinction clear?
Yes.
right? We're wearing our halachic glasses, right? The question is, does the water which is falling come into the view of those halachic glasses or not? The Gemara is telling us if the water is falling on something which is talush, it's significant and therefore it's in view of our halachic glasses. It's in the view of our halachic classes. And if it's in the view of our halachic classes, we have to define it. V'chiyutan or not v'chiyutan. On the other hand, if the water which is falling is not considered significant, then it's not within our, it doesn't come into our halachic view. And if it doesn't come into our halachic view, we don't need to define it as v'chiyutan or not v'chiyutan. It's insignificant. Okay? Now, what makes the water significant or not significant? So the Gemara wants to explain that if the water is falling on something which is talush, it is significant. And if the water is falling on something which is mechubar, it
Makes
is
sense.
not significant. Why?
Because the water falls on the mountain all the time. It's not the same as, you couldn't say that a mouse who died on the mountain made the whole mountain tummy.
The
Right.
falling water on the mountain is part
Nature.
of the
Nature.
way things always are,
Right.
right? So since it's part of the way things always are,
Then it's
it
okay.
is not significant. And when I say not significant, I don't mean it doesn't have meaning. I just mean it's not halachically significant for us.
In
It's
this
normal.
case.
Right? When water falls on something which is mechubar, it is not halachically significant. And since it's not halachically significant,
It doesn't
it doesn't
transfer.
come into my halachic eyeglass view, and therefore I don't care.
I think we get that. I think we're just trying to figure out what the problem is here, because we all agree that if it's the mountain or a wall that's always been there, which most likely has to be a cave wall. I mean, we all can figure that out without
No, but
thinking.
this
No,
is
no, no.
helping us.
Rabbi,
This
I-
is
I
helping
just wanna
us.
We're not talking about a cave wall.
This
Talking
is
about
helping
the
us-
wall-
This
the
is
wall in the
helping us see
backyard.
that the wall that you built, at least from this opinion, seems to be being treated as though it is like the mountain.
But that can't be.
In
But
other
now I
words-
say now we're back
in
to
other
the
words,
wall.
here's the
That's
case,
the
right?
right wall.
Here's the case.
That's right. That's what for
That-
Tumas
this is-
Tahara,
A
this
wall that
is-
I built is not a wall that's always been attached.
No,
so it doesn't
but I'm
count.
not. Remember, our question is talush and then mechubar. Physically speaking, talush, it was separate from the ground, and then mechubar, I attached it to the ground.
A
Is it
wall
considered
attached.
halachically mechubar? Of course, it's attached practically to the ground, but is it considered halachically mechubar? So, for instance, by Avodah Zarah, this house is attached practically to the ground. It ain't going anywhere, right? But
It didn't start that way.
but it's halachic, but from a halachic perspective, it's not defined as mechubar.
Correct.
Okay, so now the question is, what about this wall? What about this wall?
What
It's
about
gotta
this
be a
wall for
cave wall.
Tuma and Tahara?
What
Well,
about
that's
this?
true.
What about?
Tahara
In other words,
is-
what about this wall for Tuma and Tahara?
Has to
So,
be a cave wall.
so one way of looking. Oh my God. So one way of
Sorry.
looking. No. One way of looking at it is to say, okay, we have two rabbis who disagree. One, in other words, here's my cases. Case number one, I put the plate on top of the wall for the plate to get washed. Case number two, which is the seifa of the Mishnah, I put the plate there
To
so that
block
the
the
water, no, not that case. That's the middle case, that last case. I put the
To wash
plate
the
there
wall.
to wash the wall. All right? So now,
Oh, that's where I got
Right,
confused.
so-
Thank you.
right, so
I thought you were
now-
talking about the other case.
I have, those are two different opinions.
But if you put
The
the plate down
rabbi
and
who
wash the wall,
says,
it's gotta be-
the rabbi who says, I put the plate on the wall to wash the plate, and now it's going to spill over into my vegetables. The rabbi says the plate is considered talush, since it's by definition not normally exposed to water, and now it's exposed to water. The water
You gotta
becomes
live with the
the
consequences.
water becomes significant, and now I have to see it. Do I want the water? Don't I want the water? Well, I did want the water because I want the plate clean. So it's the other rabbi said, right? That's one opinion, saying that talush, right? Talush can become tameh, right? Talush can become tameh. Okay. The opinion of the rabbi who says I put the plate there so that I wash the wall. What does he consider that water? He considers that water insignificant.
Only because his wall had to have been always attached.
Not always attached, but a wall which is built is going to get wet. That's by definition the nature of a wall. You wouldn't build a building and put on the outside crepe
But
paper.
that's not the halach.
It is a whole.
That's what the machlokas is about.
I don't think that's the halach.
Okay, gentlemen, I
build a
apologize.
brick
It's
wall.
time to stop. Right?
We apologize to you.
It's time to stop.
Yeah, we built a brick wall.
I
mean,
think
it's one of the bricks
You're
we built.
getting it. We're gonna come back.
Because it wasn't always attached. But if we carve out of a cave a sharp
Rabbi, how